Strangely enough, I slept, convinced that either I had been dreaming, or were Charles still about, he would not chance awakening the household a second time with my screams. I vowed to keep the knife there in my room with me. For the whole of that week, until the rain began on Friday, I took my breakfast outside in the garden and managed to be reading a book whenever Charles arrived for his morning coffee, so he would be forced to converse with the cook, and I, when asked a question, answered him pleasantly enough and then went on with my reading. I was most unsettled then, the following week, at another vexing occurrence. I took a mild stomach flu and so excused myself from the parlor after dinner and went to bed. While I was lying there in the gathering darkness, fully awake this time but with my eyes closed, I felt what seemed like fingers brush across my lips. Gasping, I sat up, searching the room for the intruder, and I reached for the knife on my bedside drawer. No one was there. My room was empty, and I was surprised to hear my cousin's voice downstairs, arguing again with his father. Was I going mad then? Hearing things, seeing things, and now feeling things that did not exist? Tears sprang to my eyes, for if I lost my reason, I would lose all. I was sick the next day too, but the day after that, I was determined to go to the hat shop. Uncle Jeffrey called upon Zeke to come round and drive me so that I would not tire myself unnecessarily. "I hear you've been ill," said Zeke as we started off. "I'm really quite fine now," I told him. "I'm glad," he said, and I was surprised at how much it cheered me to hear him say that. He took the long way round just to show me the fishermen standing out on the surf, waiting for their morning catch. "Come to the cove with me sometime when the weather's hot. You'll like it," he said. "I might," I said, and wondered later, when he let me off at the hat shop, whether I only imagined it, or if he not held my hand longer than necessary to see me safely to the ground. I wore a skirt of blue silk and a shirt-waist of the same color, and both Helene and Violet commented on my attire. "Blue is definitely your color," Helene told me. "Either blue or green would go exceptionally well with your skin." I thanked them for their remarks, glad that if I did indeed look my best, I had appeared so in front of Zeke Carey. "Is he your new beau?" asked Violet, as together we unpacked a shipment of tulle in the back room. I blushed. "He's a friend who's been very kind to me," I told her politely. Violet, smiling, poked me in the ribs, and then we both broke into laughter. "Truly enough, though, blue does become you, yet I never see you in green," said Violet. I lowered my voice and my eyes as well. "It is forbidden," I told her. "What?" "The color is not allowed in the Sparrow House. It's the condition given to me for my coming." Violet stopped her work and stared at me with her large eyes. "Then it must be because of her," she insisted. "Jade green. Green was her favorite color, and she wore it all the time." "That's what I had suspected," said I. "Perhaps it reminds my uncle too much of her." But Violet shook her head. "I don't think that's it at all." She went to the doorway to check on the whereabouts of Helene, and seeing her with 2 customers over by the fitting table, she came back to me and whispered, "When one of our customers, Mrs. Tillis, died young, her dress caught fire. Her husband married again within 2 months of her burial. He had given away all that belonged to her except for her favorite bonnet, which he had especially liked her to wear. And then the new bride took to wearing it, and before long, they say the house was shaken with moans and sighs until Mr. Tillis himself got rid of the hat." "Oh, Violet, that surely must be gossip," I said quickly. She shook her head and lowered her voice to a whisper. "They say when someone dies a violent death, the ghost may appear at the place or dwelling drawn by a favorite possession of the one who had died. A toy, for example, in the case of a child, or the familiar bed of an old man, or the bridal veil of a young woman. The favorite thing of Jade Green, we all knew, was a color." My body grew cold at her words, remembering that hand that had twice brushed my face as I slept in my uncle's house. And yet, I reminded myself, that wasn't Jade Green's bed, for she had slept in the small spare room. No, my heart told me, if the ghost of Jade Green was about, it had been attracted to my room by the color green, the frame of my mother's picture. Perhaps my uncle too had heard the saying that Violet had relayed to me, and would take no chance in summoning the ghost. "You're still looking a little ill," Violet said to me. Are you sure you should have come back to work so soon? I'm quite well enough to work, I told her. Suppose we finish unpacking this box, and then I'll practice my stitching. My mind was in such turmoil, however, that I could scarce think of anything else that afternoon. Uncle did not seem a man given to superstition. Would he go to such lengths to ward off even the possibility of a ghost? All I could conclude was that the ghost of Jade Green was perhaps no stranger to the household, and it was for this reason that the house had been cleared of any reminder of her. Every reminder, perhaps, save the blood on the attic stairs, which even Mrs. Hastings had no great eagerness to ever look at again. No, Judith, I asked for the burgundy trim, I heard Helene saying, and I apologized profusely, determined to keep my mind upon my work, whatever should happen back in the Sparrow House. When I got home that afternoon, Mrs. Hastings insisted that I should rest, but I convinced her to let me walk in the garden. The sky was cloudy, and the sun nowhere to be seen, but the air was warm, and the vegetables and flowers were taking on new buds and blossoms, and the breeze had a feel of summer that assured me I was better off walking about here than lying abed in my room. The old gardener wordlessly pointed out a bush that was beginning to flower, and the scent was so sweet that I was soothed by its fragrance alone. There were too many things troubling me, however, to forget my cares completely. For one, I knew not how to respond to Charles anymore. When he arrived for dinner that evening, I studied him across the cream chicken, and nothing. He gave me a half-smile that was more disquieting than comforting. I was so convinced that it was he who had been in my room, touching me in my bed, that I screamed for Mrs. Hastings. And yet I was quite sure now I had been mistaken. One minute he seemed to tease me like a fond brother, then he would say something rude. Perhaps this is the way with men and brothers, I thought. What would I know of their behavior, being an only child myself? Was it right within a family that all should speak their minds freely? For if one cannot say what is in one's heart at the table, where then can he express himself? The way his eyes sought out my body, however, the way his fingers had once traced the buttons of my bodice, and Zeke's had motions to be watchful of Charles, these all played upon my mind. I did not feel the trust one should feel toward a brother. And yet I stayed quite jolly at mealtime, regaling my new family with stories of customers that came in the hat shop, the poodle that ate its mistress's bonnet, and so forth. Mrs. Hastings laughed heartily, glad for some merriment over dinner, and I even saw a bemused smile on my uncle's face. Charles, for his part, told of going to the barber to have his hair trimmed, and there being a young boy having his curls removed for the very first time. He had pointed to his tresses there on the floor, said Charles, and wept, "Look at them, they're dead." We laughed again, and as I went upstairs later, I wondered if perhaps I had been wrong in all the things about my family. But once in my room, an uneasiness took over me, and I felt chilly despite the warmth of the evening. I tried sitting by my window to recapture the pleasure I had felt in the garden that afternoon, and yet I found myself turning repeatedly to look over my shoulder, sensing an unseen presence in the room. I do not know how I knew, for I heard nothing remarkable, felt no touch. I shall bathe myself, I thought. Perhaps that will calm me. But this time, as I turned to get up, I gasped in horror and my breath stopped. For there on my rug lay a hand, a human hand. A girl's right hand detached from arm and body. I slid back on the window seat until I was pressed against the glass, my hands covering my mouth. I tried to scream, but my breath was gone and no sound issued from my throat. I could only stare at the ghastly spectacle, the limp white fingers, the delicate wrist, and then the jagged stump on which dried blood was visible, the broken connection of bone, muscle, and skin. More terrible still, the fingers suddenly began to move, the palm to lift until it was standing upright like some strange primordial creature. Drawing my feet up beside me, I sat choking, shaking, as the fingers scrambled swiftly along the floor, and the hand disappeared into the darkness beneath my bed.